Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video where today we're here to answer the age-old question here inside F124, controller or wheel. Yes, we do this every year where we dive in and try and do a bit of a direct comparison for you guys. Just a little bit of house cleaning as we get into this. It is being recorded on the day one version of the game. Of course, we've already heard rumours that there are going to be some handling changes in the very near future, so maybe this will change around in the very near future as well. But yeah, of course, normally I run Fanatec gear, so in this comparison we are going to be using an Xbox Series X controller. Yeah, I'll be honest, the results this year actually very surprising. Now, of course, anyone that is playing the game wants to know, is a controller or a wheel going to be quicker? And the simple answer is, I think this year it is still going to be the wheel, but that does come with some nuances. Now, as we actually dived on with a controller inside the game, we've kind of had a lot of worry this year. It does genuinely feel like the game was kind of set up originally for a controller, and then a wheel was kind of an afterthought, so I was pleasantly surprised actually. The controller is a whole lot more drivable inside this year's game. You know, it's very sensitive on the steering. You can actually be a bit more precise, and the big one, you get a whole lot less understeer when using a controller inside F124 than we've seen in recent titles. Because of the way the steering lock works now, it's actually near impossible to understeer with a controller, but very easy to do it on a wheel. So yeah, wheel users are going to have to be very careful, and when you end up in tougher situations, actually the controller can have a slight advantage in that regard. Traction is another one as well, where the traction is so easy inside this year's game. A controller's actually got quite a big advantage because you can straighten up the car very quickly and able to ride the throttle very early on the exits of corners. A circuit, say like Baku for example, through the first sector where it is all straight line traction zones, is probably actually going to be very good if you're on a controller. But again, you do lack the nuance, obviously, the finer precision that you get with a wheel. But you can even see, going through like the Fania chicane here, even with a little bit of a mistake, actually able to be a whole lot more precise than I've been able to in recent years. So that is, you know, certainly good to know as well, and I think is going to make it a whole lot easier. If you are a controller player, you are going to find early on this year's game that you can have a bit of a better chance against your friends that have got a wheel as well there. But there's a few other things that you need to consider inside F124, and the big one this year is all about the tyres. As you can see, it is still very difficult, you know, trying to manage the front locking and things like that on a controller. Yes, you might do less well on the rears, but as we all know already, controllers are not good for that front locking, and on this year's game, front locking is really prominent. So although you might be able to match your friends on one lap pace, I think, yeah, managing it over the course of a race is going to be a very different story, especially during this test. Of course, I use default setups so that no kind of configuration has an advantage over the other one then. So yeah, front locking, if you can try and tune it out of your setups, you might stand a better shot, but ultimately I feel that is going to be an absolute killer for tyres, especially if you are using a pad, just because a trigger lacks that kind of intuitive feel that obviously you get from a steering wheel and pedals at the end of the day. You know, I do understand, obviously not everyone has the space for a wheel or anything like that, and I also do appreciate, of course, you know, people do spend a lot of money on sim racing hardware, and of course at the end of the day, Formula 1 cars are driven with a steering wheel and pedals as well, so it definitely feels closer than it has done in recent years. And I must also admit, definitely the easiest, I think, since 2017, when I first started doing these videos. Able to just pick up a controller and start playing, absolutely has been massively improved on this year's games. You know, if you are a top level competitor and you've been using a controller for many years at this point, you're probably still going to stand a very good chance, but I think you're going to certainly feel the one hand is tied behind your back when you're racing, you know, over a race distance. I think is going to be very different. That, as well as the low speed twitchiness, as you can see there, making our way out of the bus stop, really difficult to still try and navigate. Just that lack of feel and the weird low speed physics if you will, certainly still leave a lot to be desired inside F124. Switching over though to the wheel, of course, we had a lot of complaints to EA and Codemasters last week. Of course, these are still being apparently fixed behind the scenes. I haven't had a go on kind of the updated driving physics just yet, but I've spoken to a couple of other people and they believe, yeah, it is a big improvement over the previous, the version of the game that we are currently playing on. So that might end up meaning that the wheel has an even bigger advantage further down the line. But of course, yeah, like I said, if you can kind of drive around the understeer, you have got a really good, very high grip game in this year's title. I mean, yeah, the fact that Puon was flat out, even on a default setup, I don't think I've seen in a very long time as well there, as you can see. Obviously, I've spent a lot of time on a wheel already on this year's game, so, we have already got that muscle memory that has slowly come in as well. And ultimately, I found that I was only about a second and a half, 2 seconds faster on a wheel. When you consider the fact I'm a full-time wheel user on these games, I'm actually quite impressed with that on the controller side of things. And, I think the changes that they have made have really worked for controller users. But of course, probably the most vocal people inside the community are obviously going to be wheel players. So that obviously has meant that perhaps controller users feel that they've been put back on the back burner again. But ultimately, I feel like, yeah, the gap is a whole lot closer in this year's game, at least for newer drivers. And again, although everything is very odd at low speed grip, wheel, you definitely obviously have got a better shot, just because you can be a lot more accurate and precise with it. And then you can see trying to sync up a lap between both the wheel and the controller. Like I said, don't really read too much into the raw lap time, more sort of into the feel of the car as well. There you can see we actually able to turn in slightly earlier on the controller as well in traction. Had I not actually messed up down at turn 1, you stand a really good shot as you make your way through those lower speed corners. Of course, the change of direction still always on a controller that is very difficult, and especially obviously, like I said, in the low speed stuff, it can be notorious inside F124. But again, you can actually chuck the car, I feel, more aggressively into corners. You actually are able to kind of find apexes. You can actually take a little bit more apex, I find, on a controller this year. So maybe, I don't believe there's any kind of traction built in for controller users, but I do certainly feel that there have been a few tweaks and things to try and make the physics a little bit simpler as well there. And like I said, if you've been a controller user in years gone by, I think you can have a lot of fun on this year's game. I think, for the casual player, it has absolutely been skewed to try and make it more enjoyable for them as well. And, as setups continue to improve and evolve as well, I'm sure for the controller users, that tyre wear is also going to become a whole lot more manageable as well down the line. Of course, if you are though looking for a wheel and you are on a controller inside F124, I would highly recommend Moser Gear as well. I'll make sure I leave a link to them down in the description below. If you're on PC, I think they provide the best bang for your buck direct drive wheels in the F1 space at the moment, and I absolutely love using their products as well. So like I said, if you want to buy through them and support me as well, you can do down in the description below. But yeah, there we go then. Those are going to be our laps here inside F124. Let me know whether you're on a controller or a wheel for this year's game and what your first thoughts and feelings are as well. And we'll be back very soon with more Formula 1 content.